Hi, in this video we're going to take a look how to centrally report and manage permissions using DeliverPoint. So first of all, what we're going to do is just navigate to DeliverPoint. So we can do that by clicking onto the icon in the top right hand corner and choosing DeliverPoint. And you'll notice in here that the scope is set to the site that we were on when we accessed DeliverPoint, but we can change that scope by showing the tree view and choosing the scope that we want to report on. And we'll talk more about scopes in just a moment. For now, I'm just going to close that and show you another way where we can go through and access DeliverPoint, and that is by adding a page. So we can add a page anywhere inside of our SharePoint environment that we have access to. We could give that a name, so I could call this something like Permissions Management, and then we can share that page with other people. And in here we can also add the DeliverPoint web part. Now, in both cases, the web part is going to be security trimmed. So you can still only report on permissions and manage permissions for those sites or lists or libraries that you have full control to, or the ability to enumerate permissions and manage permissions on. So it doesn't matter how you accessed it or who has access to this page, they won't be able to make any permission changes unless they have the rights to make permission changes. So we're just going to go through and close that for a moment, and I'm just going to navigate back to a team site and we'll access DeliverPoint in this way. And I just want to show you how the scope, when I do so, is set to the scope for that given site. So when we go through and access DeliverPoint here, the scope this time is set to Lightning Tools Sales, which happened to be the site that I was on when I accessed it. Okay, so in here, like I say, you can click onto Show Tree View, and showing the tree view allows me to change the scope. The default is that we're always going to see the current site right at the very top, and then everything else appears in alphabetical order afterwards. And you'll see a mix match of different types of site collections. So in here we've got some classic site collections, which are like these ones, the Alpine Ski House and Adventure Work Cycles. We also have Microsoft 365 groups, which has a slightly different icon. And then we have SharePoint sites that have been teamified or made available in Teams, if you like. So they have the Teams logo in there, and you may also see some hub sites and associated sites as well. And each of these icons are all explained here inside that legend. And you can focus in on the different types of view as well. So notice that we could just choose Teams if we want, or we can jump back to classic sites, or we can also go to the hub sites view. And whichever one we choose, we can still go through and expand those site collections to be able to see the different sites inside of those site collections, and also the lists and libraries as well. So here in this example, I just want to explain the tree view a little bit. So this is the site collection, Lightning Tools Sales, which of course is named after the root site as well. They will share the same URL. So the root site is the first site inside this site collection. And then we have Partners, which is a subsite, Regions, which is a subsite. And as you can see by the icon for Regions is in full color, whereas the icon for Partners is dimmed. Anything with a full color icon has unique permissions, and anything with a dimmed icon is inheriting permissions. And as you can see, the same thing it applies to the lists and libraries as well. If you just compare this document library here, this has a full color icon, whereas this document library here, Client Documents, has a dimmed icon. So again, we can see which ones have inherited permissions and which ones have unique permissions. So from that point of view, we can decide what we want to report on. And when we're looking to what to report on, we're actually choosing a scope. Now, unlike SharePoint, natively, SharePoint can only report on one thing at a time. So we can look at permissions for a site, we can look at permissions for a list, or for a library, or for a folder, or a document. With DeliverPoint, you can report on multiple objects at any one time, and they can even span different types of object as well. So a site is an object, a list is an object, a library is an object, a folder is an object. So for that reason, we can set the scope of objects that we want to report on. So at the moment, my scope is actually set to an entire site collection that happens to be a teamified site collection. So that means that when I report on this, I'm actually seeing a lot of the site collection scoped options. Notice that the reports menu includes dead accounts, unlicensed users, external users. These are all reports that you can only run at site collection scope. So if I deselect the site collection and choose the site, you'll notice that those reports have disappeared, but my scope is still Lightning Tools Sales, and within that scope is everything beneath it. So any child sites and any child lists or libraries, as well as folders and documents, they're all in scope. And we could have multiple scopes if we want to. So notice that I could collapse this site collection and still have Lightning Tools Sales selected. We could do a search on something like marketing, and inside marketing we could choose the marketing site. So now I have two scopes. I have the marketing scope and I have the Lightning Tools Sales scope, and the marketing scope also happens to have some documents and some lists and so on as well. Okay, so that's setting the scope for the report. So when I run a report like Discover Permissions, notice how it includes marketing as well as the sales site. And likewise, if I was to perform an action, so if I was to perform an action and say transfer permissions from demo user 9 and we'll select demo user 8 as the target account, it is going to run that action on everything that is in scope. Now, of course, it's not going to go through and break permission inheritance and so on unless you tell it to, but what we can do here is affect subsites. So that would be subsites that have unique permissions on how this is configured already. So in other words, if demo user 9 happens to have permissions to a subsite that demo user 8 does not have permissions to, and the permissions for that subsite are unique and not inherited, then this change will take place, transferring permissions from demo user 9 to demo user 8 on that subsite as well as on the site that I selected. We can do the same thing with the lists. So if there are lists and libraries that have unique permissions within inside any of these two scopes, so anywhere beneath those sites inside the hierarchy, they will also be affected by the change. And again, for any list items or folder items, and that includes subfolder items and so on as well. So with those three options checked, that's going to be the case. It'll be any object with unique permissions beneath these two sites inside the site collection, they will be affected. And of course, it'll only affect those where demo user 9 has permissions and demo user 8 does not. So we can force break the permission inheritance, and I wouldn't ever do that at a scope such as this. It may be on a specific document library that you want to grant permissions to somebody, and the only way of granting permissions to someone is to break the permission inheritance. So that is when that force break permissions should typically be used. What we can also do is support a rollback option. So the rollback option allows me to reverse the job. So even if 1,000 sites were selected and we made a whole bunch of changes between these two accounts, we could reverse that at any time as long as we select the support rollback. Now, in the action here, we could also choose modify SharePoint groups and modify Microsoft 365 groups. So ticking these two won't just make direct permission changes, but it will also change the group memberships as well. So if demo user 9 was a member of a group, like a members group inside a site, demo user 8 will become a member of that group and demo user 9 would be removed since this is a transfer permissions option. And any direct permissions where the permissions are assigned to demo user 9 not via a group but directly, then demo user 8 will grab those permissions instead and demo user 9's permissions will be removed. Now occasionally you might run into an error, and typically that error could be that a document or a subsite or something was deleted since the last search index, and the tree view over here on the left is built using the search index. So that means that we may see a site that no longer exists, and therefore when DeliverPoint tries to make these changes, it can't find the site and therefore it kicks out an error. So if that's the case, we can just carry on, or we can stop after error, which is the default selection just here. So I'm going to choose run, and as you can see, that's going to go through and process a number of sites for me. And once it's done, it's logged the changes that took place, and we could roll that back if need be. We could also roll it back as well by going into the jobs view at the top here. So the last job that we've run will always be at the top of the list, and we could just simply select that and choose roll back if we want to undo it. Okay, but that transfer permissions, like I say, was running in the scope of those two sites there. And we can deselect those. There's also an account view as well. So the account view allows me to search on a particular user. So in here, if we do a search on demo user 8 as an example, I can select that account, and then from the reports menu, you're going to see some options or different reports based on demo user 8's permissions. So one of those reports is the unique permissions report. So running that one will show me what account memberships the user has. So we can see that demo user 8 is inside some sharing link groups, also via the Active Directory security groups, also a member of a members group, and so on. And we can also see what permissions are assigned to that user as well. And from here, you could also make changes if you want to. So we can choose a row that we want to change. So on this commission sheets item, if we wanted to remove those permissions, we could do so using the actions. Okay, so that's how to use DeliverPoint and the tree view to change those different types of report centrally and to be able to report on multiple things at any one time. What we're going to do in subsequent videos is really sort of focus in on some of these individual reports, things like templates as well, and the different types of actions that you can perform. All right, so many thanks. I'll catch you in the next video.